Okay. Dear audience, welcome one more day to the second interview of this creators series in my Creative Sensei blog and YouTube channel. Today I'm going to introduce you to Steve Rasmussen. He will pronounce his name much better than I do. Steve and I met, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but at the University of Edinburgh Shukokai Karate Club. And so we are martial arts buddies. And now over time we became creative buddies. And that's all we're going to talk about today, about a little bit of his history and his projects and what he thinks about creativity and other topics. So Steve, if you want to introduce yourself in a brief sentence or something, just welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bago. I appreciate you having me on the show. It's very exciting. So, yeah, we've been a long time. No, we won't say long time. We've known each other for quite a while. And it's true, we met through martial arts, but we always had this commonality of creativity. And I would define you as a closet creative when I met you. You were like dabbling, and you slowly started to come out of your shell and maybe not moving away from your science and your intellectual or academic background, but expanding on it, let's say, and maybe bridging, that gap between, let's say, the left mind and the right mind. So I think that's my assessment of you, and so it's so great to see you doing wonderful things and exploring many concepts and ideas, and I always enjoy watching what you're working on. So again, thanks for having me on this your program. So.
Yes, well, thank you. But it was about talking about yourself, not about me. If you want to summarize your trajectory briefly.
It's a long conversation. I mean, what am I? What am I? I guess archetype-wise, I'm an artist, meaning I'm someone who identifies with a sort of process about understanding oneself and life through various practices that generally create something that you put into the world, I guess. So, we met through martial arts, but I always say that I'm an artist, not a fighter. So I use even martial arts as a tool for my own self-exploration. I think there's a lot of psychological aspects to it. Why one goes into the martial arts is one reason, and then why one stays and where they ultimately end up is another. So for me, I think I would identify myself as an artist and someone who also likes to move and express myself. So I think there's a combination of different aspects.
Okay, fantastic. I agree. I know you move. Look, I have 10 questions for you. So formulated in a new way, which I'm going to show you a keyword, and you might answer whatever comes up to mind there. And then if I didn't get enough or I want to know more, I'll ask you more questions. But first, it will be like 10 mini sections, okay? The first one is
childhood.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Well, my childhood, as far as creativity goes, I was really fortunate. I think as a lot of people growing up, they do dabble in creativity, but very few continue with it. And there's various reasons why, I think. And I was really fortunate to have the support of my family, specifically my mother, who was, to this day is my #1 fan. So I'm very lucky that she's always encouraging me to be happy, to be healthy, and to follow, things that and choices in my life that lead towards that. So creativity for me is something that's been part of me, part of my DNA, and therefore I'm very fortunate that I can make decisions and have the support of my family based on which is obvious, a sacrifice at times to choose creativity over, let's say, stability, if you want to use another. Not that you can't have both together. We strive to have that, but so I'm very lucky to have that. So I remember, for example, I would draw and I would play with colors and I would like to sort of paint, and I'd show it to my mother and she'd be like, wow, this is so beautiful. And she'd put it on the wall. So for me that was there's many connections there with love, with acceptance, with encouragement, the unconditional aspects of that. So for me, that's always been embedded in me. So I guess in a way, as a creative, we're often said that an artist or a creative is very sensitive, and I think there's truth in that, and we have to become more hardened over time as we professionalize our practices, and we work with clients who have various needs, and we have to fit into what they require. But I was really lucky to start out in the sense of having that kind of encouragement, that foundation. So I guess in a way, I'm still that child who explores in a curious, naive sort of way. And I think that is who I try to continue to be with all my practices, even if I've done martial arts or creativity all of my life. I really try to keep that open-mindedness and that curiosity and the exploration, and to be humble. And the martial arts teaches that humility, which I think is a component that is really important to have, and it allows us a lot of freedom. Because if you think of it from a the perspective of the world, if we have a skill to take care of ourselves, to protect ourselves, and I define self-defense as not just self-defense as in dealing with someone else. You're dealing with external stress or anxiety. You have this capacity to stay healthy. That is first self-defense, both mind and body, to be healthy. So I think these all kind of tie in for me. And so when you go into the world and you have to deliver your creativity, it's a tricky transition. But that was the foundation from my childhood, to sum up your question.
Now I have next question.
Creativity. Yeah. So how would I define creativity?
Yes, what it means for you,
how do I
you
apply
define
creativity?
it, how important it is for the world, and what it means for you. Tricky question.
It's a broad question. I think with creativity, I think of freedom, exploration. Again, there's that curiosity. There's that giving yourself a license to, as the quote says, to take time to waste time. This idea of putting time aside where you waste it. And what happens, they say that a lot of ideas are birthed out of boredom. And I really love that framework, that you give yourself time away from everything, which could be, in most cases, people, technology, etc. And during this time, you become a little bored. And through boredom, your mind drifts. And through that, you start to think, okay, I have this idea. And then you follow that idea, whether that's visual or whatever your medium is for creativity. And you see where that goes. So I think that there's a birth of creativity that comes out of that boredom. If you don't allow yourself that time, then it doesn't happen. Maybe it happens in the shower. Maybe it happens when you're washing dishes. These are natural, everyday flow states, which I find is really interesting. And I try to put myself into these flow states. Walking in the land this morning, I enter a flow state where my body is doing something repetitive and my mind is able to float and to kind of, maybe it's exploring, but it's in one way letting go of a lot of things, another way it's opening up to other ideas that are beyond the left brain, the conscious brain. And I think that's really important as well, part of my process. So creativity is so broad. I guess it's a thing that you can inject into many things. If I'm practicing my martial art, Silat, I'm looking to think, okay, what can this particular tool teach me about moving in a more effective or more expressive or more functional way? So for me, creativity is like something you choose to consciously inject into whatever you do. So I don't believe it's necessarily visual. I think creativity is so many things. Visual is only one possible realm of expression. And I think that creativity can happen in the way you move, in the way you wash your dishes, in the way you go from one position to another. You can do it in a way that triggers a different state of mind and a different shift. And I think that connects to my interest in performance as well, because that's also a way to shift one state and externally it looks like you're doing something for the purpose of showing something, but actually internally there's a lot of things that are happening with your own self-awareness, your own exploration, your own sense of personal expression, and that is also creativity for me.
Funny you mentioned this, washing the dishes, because I do it by hand, like many people. And so I'm picking up a challenge, because I have it every day, how to be creative while doing the dishes. I'm gonna see what I can come up with. Probably it's gonna be more fun. Anyway, let's move on to the next keyword.
Practice.
Let's move on to the next keyword.
Practice.
What do you make of it?
I love that word, practice. I heard that recently, and someone asked me, of course, I'm living in Madrid, living in Spain, and people will say sometimes, they'll ask me to correct them when they're speaking in English. So do you say practice martial arts or do you train it? And it's interesting because what's happened when I'm evolving my understanding of English and started writing, through teaching English in Spain, I gained a huge appreciation for my own language, started writing, started reading, started really appreciating a lot of things, and it changed my thought process. So people would ask, do you say practice or train? So very often there's an answer that you say, okay, well in yoga we would say practice yoga, you practice martial arts, you train CrossFit. But it got me thinking, and I love this idea that we're always practicing. So it gives us a license that we are always exploring. So if I go to the park and I say, I'm just going to practice. So after walking, go to the park, take off my shoes, bare feet, grounding, there's a lot of science behind that. The wet grass on the feet after 7 weeks inside without any contact. Let's just say it was highly, highly stimulating. This is something that I realize that every day, all the things I do as my health routines or my creative practices, I just said it, they're practices. I'm practicing. It doesn't mean I'm not professional or I don't know what I like or what I'm good at, but it allows me the freedom to explore different things without having sort of a fixed lens, let's say, all the time on one particular thing. So practice for me is everything. You could argue life is a practice. When you're in a relationship, that's a practice. That's an understanding of yourself through someone else, understanding of people in general, and it creates different challenges to understand yourself better. This is practice. This is in karate or in karate do or any this idea of do or way. It's a practice. It's a way of living, not because you're fixed. It's because your way of looking at life and the world has a certain dimension that allows for practice, exploration, and I really love that. And I think that's something I hold true to every day.
I think that links in nicely with the next item of the questions. You mentioned practice as a more relaxed approach to what you need to do, because they say practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. But the practice is kind of the training mode, basically, for the actual
work. Okay, work.
Or maybe not. Just
yeah.
I think that links in nicely with the next item of the questions. You mentioned practice as a more relaxed approach to what you need to do, because they say practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. But the practice is kind of the training mode, basically, for the actual
work. Okay.
Or maybe not. Just share your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah. I think work is a 4-letter word. It's a bit dirty because I think I'm careful not to work. I'm careful not to use the word work, because if I say now I have to work, most people change their state of mind. And fortunately, as a creative and also a teacher, also as an aspiring commercial actor, my work is is many things. You know, it's so connected. There's no one type of work. It reminds me of my meditation teacher, Andreas. He had mentioned before, to do the work, you have to do the work. You know, and I like this more, like do the work. That means that there's certain things you should be doing, you know you should be doing, and you have to put some discipline to it. So I like it in that way, but most times people say, I have to go to work. They're depressed. It's not really a positive thing. I can't wait to go to work. I can't wait to go and explore my creative possibilities or to do what I love to do. That's different. So I think using language also is something I've appreciated more and more in the last 7 years being in Spain. And it's really important to be careful how you use language. So when you show me that word work, I have an old definition, which I still need to realize. I realize now I need to dissolve, because there's a better way to look at it. Maybe work is discipline. And I agree with discipline.
Yeah, like hard work. You need to be disciplined about it. It's funny because there are two ways to kind of merge. When you do practice something, it's because you want to learn to reach, or you want to reach a certain standard to do a work of certain quality, or to create a work of certain quality. So it's kind of a training wheels versus this. And this guy, Doc O'Neill, I can't remember right now his surname, from verbal to visual, he teaches people to sketchnote, and he has a whole line of thought regarding to learning in public, which is something leading from you start your practice in private. You do experiment freely, but there is a point where you can start sharing this early on in your process, in your learning process, before you reach that whatever standard you set up to reach, to present your work, your finished, polished work. So it's kind of, what you mention is more about a mindset, like take from the word work, the appropriate mindset. If it's discipline is what you need to develop from beginning practice to something you can share. Doesn't need to be polished or finished, but to reach certain standard. So I think it's a whole world in between.
Absolutely. I like the way you're explaining it. I can't help but think about my foundations of martial art through my sensei Ron Fagan in Canada, and he's such a huge influence on me. And one of the things I really am most grateful for is that I remember being 5 months, 6 months testing for my yellow belt, and I remember within a week after that, new people came into the class, and I remember my sensei saying, "Hey, Stephen, you teach front kick." Mr. Rasmussen, he used to always call me. So he would say, "Oh, you know how to do front kick, teach it." So and that was like 6 months into karate. So what's happened with me is that I was really fortunate that I was in an environment where I was encouraged from the beginning to be a teacher. So there was no like after 10 years, maybe I'm told, okay, now you're authorized to teach. Now you begin that. And what happens? We know how it happens. We know that if someone is at 10 years in something, or let's say 10, 15, 20 years, working towards some level of mastery, which is another conversation itself, if you suddenly introduce teaching at that point, what happens? They're a beginner. And also you could argue, based on what you were saying there, maybe you even have more fear or hesitation in order to go into that. Because there's such a difference, it's such a contrast between your skill level as a practitioner and your ability to transmit that to other people. There's a gap which is huge. And to bridge that gap is so difficult. Then you have to set aside your ego, be more humble, realize that you have a very low skill level as a teacher, and therefore you have to overcome that. Whereas you start from the beginning, you're already performing, because when you teach, you perform. I think a lot of things are performance. When I'm doing a photo shoot, I am performing. You might think that it's the subject that is the core. I think as the photographer, as the one who's orchestrating and directing, that is the core, that is the key performance that is most crucial for creating the environment and the stimulus response and the relationship and the connection you have with the subject. So I think that when you teach, you have the same thing. So for me, that was a big aspect of what I do, and I'm very fortunate and very grateful for that.
What, since you mentioned, that might take us to
photography. Oh, okay. Well, I studied photography in Canada. And I remember for such a long time wondering, what is photography? Is it creative? Because, you know, we touched on the creativity, but if you're capturing something, are you creating it? So what I realized, for me, it took me a long time, I realized that the creative process for me is the connection with the person. So it's about portrait and it's about creating a moment. So I create the moment, which I capture. I create the connection. I create a response that I feel is favorable, and I hopefully catch it. That for me is photography.
Well, yes, you have been, well, I just still are a commercial photographer. And I have to give you credit. I don't think many people know my Pino Photos account in Instagram. I take pictures. But mostly I've been always interested in portraits. And when I met you, I saw you in action. I've been your subject as well. And I've seen in action how you elicit reactions from people. You create the expressions. And then I understood, coming from your influence and the example you said, not only I learned how to do it, but also that was my way. There are two ways to be a photographer. One is the documentary type, who portrays whatever is there and doesn't interfere. But for portraits, I do like to interfere. I interfere a lot. I create the interaction. I actively create moments and guide people using NLP techniques as well, guiding people through emotional pathways to elicit expressions, and I picked that from you, so thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and that's the thing, photography could be a creating setup. I mean, many Instagrammers are actually creating little worlds now, many influencers anyway, but it's mostly about storytelling, I guess. But that would have another line of topic on its own for a long time, which is not the point of this interview just yet. We might have another one. What about this now?
Martial arts. Okay. Yeah, it's curious because in Spanish it's artes marciales, as you know, and I always think that's so great. It puts the art first. And I thought, that's me. I put the art first. The art being, as I would define, and especially in martial arts, is a vehicle for your own self-exploration and self-expression. You know, so it's a journey. It's a practice. It's something that should take you from wherever you are and whatever state you're in into increasingly more aware state of yourself, and then your environment, your relationships. So it's so far removed from what people think of as fighting. You know, the fight is with ourselves. Let's be honest, especially as creatives, the fight is with ourselves and our own self-criticism and our sensitivity to other people criticizing us. So self-defense, or martial arts specifically, gives you a form of self-defense that allows you to, and not from a hardening point of view, more like a flowing, more to receive, an aikido or uke to receive, you know, in Japanese. So we're able to better receive feedback or criticism, and this is a long process, and I think it's something we all get challenged with as creatives. So I think martial arts gives us ability to not always resist, go with it, because through that, and Silat is a great practice for this, because for me it's the first time that a martial art actually teaches a masculine aspect and a feminine aspect. And not saying that man, woman, I'm saying that more of the characteristics of those traits. So one of the things in Silat we do is that when you receive a certain energy, you go with that energy. And it's very much like dance. If someone is leading, and let's say I'm in the female role and I'm with a partner who's in the male role, you'd think, well, that's strange. It's like, well, what happens is that in Silat, you're switching roles all the time. So if I'm working with someone and they're guiding me, I'm receiving and I'm not resisting it. But the point is that by receiving, you are open, which is very female, no? To open, to receive. I don't have to explain why that is. And the masculine is about entering, right? Yeah. So when you're receiving that, what happens is that you realize that you are observing. So you're in a state where you have to be extra sensitive and more aware of what's happening. So through that play, that exploration, you start to see opportunities. You start to see what you can do in that situation. And then what happens when you start to play it after a while, when you see an opportunity, you take it, which is more in silat, masculine, go in to do the move. So even with the music, you have movements that are very flowing. This is more continuous, this is more feminine. The movement is continuous, but the masculine is suddenly, boom, there's a strike or a step. And that's a drum beat. That's you going, boom, entering in and doing something specifically. It becomes more combative, there's a different mindset. But that's the idea with male-female. So maybe I'm going a bit off topic, but it's a very interesting concept. And it's the same as with dance. I think it's the same. Yes. Is that learning both roles allows you the ability to shift from one to the other. So if you can become, as a man, if I can become more, let's say, feminine, it's a huge advantage in martial arts, in life, the connectivity, the sensitivity with people, your creativity, which I'd argue is definitely more female than male. Finding the balance with the two, and in Silat, that's when someone is super dangerous, super skilled, is when you can see in their movement they have both female and male working simultaneously, harmonically. And I think that if when you think about people you know, it's the same. The people that can switch dynamically between a more, again, it's characteristics, but masculine, and can shift into feminine and have the combination or the blend of the two, super effective with whatever they do.
Yeah, I think I could go on for a long time about the roles that society will feed you, and depriving both roles or stereotypes, or I don't know if it's gender or whatever. I don't want to get in deep trouble with this, but women are warriors and men are sensitive. We all have both traits built in. We just tame down, so we are limiting ourselves. And I think in the context of martial arts, I think Silat, from the descriptions you make of it, is quite disruptive because it's more of a strong male yang energy. I've done karate for many years, which has been good because I developed that side. And as a woman, it made me probably stronger in that sense. But in martial arts, I was missing out maybe the soft side. Maybe Aikido is more fluid art, which starts with receiving and then giving back. I don't want to get deeper into this topic, but I think it's quite an interesting line of exploration for the personal development. And I think it's got to do also, the yin-yang energy, with the different states of mind, useful and very critical for creativity as well. Like they say, the most creative people can connect and use the brain, both sides of the brain at the same time, or having quick connections. I need to study the neurological basis of this, but I think I've read something in diagonal in this term. So it's about the integration of both sides. And I think the work you do with Silat probably is feeding you creativity because of the integration of more, and also growing in more aspects in your life, in personality. So the more you expand in any line, any direction, the more you bring it back to your creativity or your project. Think.
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of times there's like people follow a martial arts system, but I think that what I've tried to do, because I've been, let's say, independent and free for several years, i.e. I'm not under anyone's direction for various reasons, that allows me to put the art first, my art first. And I really believe this, any art form should be about the artist first, not about the system, not about the lineage, not about the history, the religion, or the origins. It's about the artist first.
Well, they say any martial arts. I'll tell you about my just coming from the martial arts. There's a saying of learn the technique, master the technique, forget the technique. In clowning, my personal background was learn structures, because when you go into a room with a person, you need to know what to do. So learn something that works. It's thought of by people who know better. So you do that, you don't make a mistake. You avoid mistakes in that context. So stick to that. You go in and do something that was useful. Over time, you master the structure, so you don't get there so anxious. It helps you to get your teeth cut. Is that what you say? No, I don't know. It helps you get started. No, when you have these structures, it's like you memorize as if it was an act. But it's over time, you learn the essence of this, which is distraction, giving the child control, having, certain objectives. And then you keep the objectives, and you can throw away that structure as long as you keep the principles and the way it was designed, and you can improvise as long as you keep the principles, because you just have the principle. You practice so much that you free yourself from that. And I think in martial arts, that's what's missing, and that's the path you've taken is, okay, I've learned all this, I have these structures, this background, I know my body, I know the mechanics, I know what it can do, but now I'm gonna develop it according to me. And as a clown, I have my own personality, but there's principles of practice you mustn't get past if you don't wanna make big mistakes, or the other way, if you wanna succeed, you have to follow certain principles. It's not techniques, curriculum, or anything, just the essence of the martial art or essence of the discipline. And that's the path you are now at this stage for the past 7 years. You develop your own formula that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I call it the 3 Ps. There's many Ps that I include in the CLAT, but patterns, postures, and principles. So that gives me a framework. I say, okay, we're going to work on this pattern of movement, figure 8. The posture is going to be this particular defensive or protective posture. And the principles are 1, 2, and 3. That's the underlying principles. But through that gives you a lot of freedom. And I really approach that a lot with creativity. And one of the things is really interesting about creativity, I notice it more about in quarantine where we have limitations. We're doing this, our chat. Yeah, and these constraints, I think, what do I have technology-wise that's going to give me the best result for doing this, our little chat today? And I think, okay, so I'm really utilizing all the setup. If you saw my setup, you'd probably laugh, but it works because I have the skill to understand what's important and what's not. So I look to get the best result I can with what I have. So I think that a lot of times with keeping things so broadly open, and the classic thing is a client says, hey, listen, Begonia, I want you to create this for me. There's no time limit, and there's no limit with budget.
I hate those challenges.
It's a disaster because we think we're like kids. We're like, we want more, give us more money, give us more time. It's the contrary. We want to have limitations. So now we can go walking certain times in the day, or we can exercise outside. I've done more walking in the last 24 hours than I have previously, probably for a month in 2 days, 24 hours. So it makes you think, okay, with some compression or restriction, that's where creativity is birthed. So if you don't have the restriction, you need to create it. This is where discipline comes in, structuring your day, morning routine. All these things give you that possibility to, as a child who wants to be creative, I want more. You push the boundaries and you appreciate more because you know that at a certain time, you have to go inside. This morning, 10 o'clock, I have to be inside. That's the rule. So what do? I maximize. I push it to the limit.
Yes.
And then I have a great morning.
Yeah, and you get things done as well.
One thing I wanted to say about the way of thinking as well, this idea that you mentioned about forgetting, and recently I watched a really good video talking about exactly this, that forgetting is actually a big part of the process of learning. And they're realizing this now is that the way the brain works, part of forgetting is super important with that process. And even things like, for example, if you do some type of learning and then you go walking, for example, okay, and you do some kind of activity that gives you a flow state where you relax and you're kind of flowing, you lose sense of time, you lose the sense of self-consciousness. During that time, your brain is working out that material that has entered your brain. And you're going to likely have long-term memory retention because of that, which I find so interesting about how the brain works. I just want to touch on that thing because it's something I do try to be aware of, that if I want to learn, when's the best time of day to learn? When am I most creative? And what do I do before or after to enter that state and also to deepen that understanding or that experience? And if you do NLP terms, how do you anchor it? How do you do something that's going to anchor physically that sensation. So when you need to go to that sensation again, you trigger the anchor and it triggers that feeling, which allows you to better enter that state again. So I love science as well. I'm not a scientist like you, but
I'm not a biologist, so by any means, it's
Yeah.
about reading. I think I'm gonna have at some point another conversation with you and maybe some other friend about flow learning, and all these things.
Excellent.
In the world. For the purpose of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I call it the 3 Ps. There's many Ps that I include in CDAT, but patterns, postures, and principles. So that gives me a framework. I say, okay, we're going to work on this pattern of movement, figure 8. The posture is going to be this particular defensive or protective posture. And the principles are 1, 2, and 3. That's the underlying principles. But through that gives you a lot of freedom. And I really approach that a lot with creativity. And one of the things that's really interesting about creativity, I notice it more about in quarantine where we have limitations. You know, we're doing this our chat. Yeah, and these constraints, I think, what do I have technology-wise that's going to give me the best result for doing this, our little chat today? And I think, okay, so I'm really utilizing all the setup. If you saw my setup, you'd probably laugh, you know. But it works because I have the skill to understand what's important and what's not. So I look to get the best result I can with what I have. So I think that a lot of times with keeping things so broadly open, and the classic thing is a client says, hey, listen, Begonia, I want you to create this for me. There's no time limit and there's no limit with budget.
Oh, I hate those challenges.
It's a disaster because we think we're like kids. We're like, we want more, give us more money, give us more time. It's the contrary. We want to have limitations. So now we can go walking certain times in the day, or we can exercise outside. I've done more walking in the last 24 hours than I have previously, probably for a month in 2 days, 24 hours. So it makes you think, okay, with some compression or restriction, that's where creativity is birthed. So if you don't have the restriction, you need to create it. This is where discipline comes in, structuring your day, morning routine. All these things give you that possibility to, as a child who wants to be creative, I want more. You push the boundaries and you appreciate more because you know that at a certain time, you have to go inside. This morning, 10 o'clock, I have to be inside. That's the rule. So what do? I maximize. I push it to the limit.
Yes. So that's.
And then I have a great morning.
Yeah, and you get things done as well. Now I'm gonna.
One thing I say about the way of thinking as well. This idea that you mentioned about forgetting, and recently I watched a really good video talking about exactly this. That forgetting is actually a big part of the process of learning, and they're realizing this now is that the way the brain works, part of forgetting is super important with that process. And even things like, for example, if you do some type of learning and then you go walking, for example, okay, you do some kind of activity that gives you a flow state where you relax, you're kind of flowing, you lose sense of time, you lose the sense of self-consciousness. During that time, your brain is working out that material that has entered your brain. And you're going to likely have long-term memory retention because of that, which I find so interesting about how the brain works. I just want to touch on that thing because it's something I do try to be aware of, that if I want to learn, when's the best time of day to learn? Mm-hmm. When am I most creative? And what do I do before or after to enter that state and also to deepen that understanding or that experience? And if you do NLP terms, how do you anchor it? Yeah. How do you do something that's going to anchor physically that sensation? So when you need to go to that sensation again, you trigger the anchor and it triggers that feeling, which allows you to better enter that state again. So I love science as well. I'm not a scientist like you, but
no, I'm not in there. I'm not a biologist, so by any means, it's about reading. Yeah. I think I'm gonna have at some point another conversation with you and maybe some other friend about flow learning, and all these things, the whole world. Excellent. For the purpose of this,
painting.
This can come to painting, what you do? What are you up to with paper? What it means for you?
Well, this is a painting of mine. So I created this because it's quite trendy now, but when I studied photography, we had used these. This tells you how long ago I studied in Canada. But what's interesting is that there's such a personalization, and I kind of realized that because I was painting and exploring, as always, some level of making a mess. I'll call it making a mess. And I wanted to create this because I wanted to, again, further increase the personalization or my own expression in photographing someone. In this case, it's me, and I painted this. So there's a direct integration of myself and my creative expression in this moment. But if I photograph you in front of this, I'm also in there in a different way. And I know how this interacts with light, or how to explore it in a way that gives another level of expression. So that's why I pursued this idea of creating a series of backdrops, which I'll further explore once the time is right. So for me, when I paint, I think this is an opportunity to get my hands dirty, to be purely tactile, and to let go of perfection, let go of even expectations. This is challenging, and I think that people do it when they're, for example, playing with a child, or they're in a context where it's not about result and you're not going to be judged, and you're there actually encouraging someone else to do it. That's one way to bypass it. I think another way to bypass it is tell yourself, okay, I'm going to play with paints, and I'm just going to throw it out when it's done.
Okay.
Because no one's going to see it. Yeah, no attachment. It's completely detached from that result. And this is something that I think that we as creatives, it's really important to explore that, because for example, now I'm exploring drawing using Photoshop to create some images that embody a feeling I want to express for my martial arts. But I want it to be organic. So I'm using a tablet, it's still digital, but I'm able to give it a feeling that looks like it's hand-drawn. So people would know it is hand-drawn, it never existed in a physical ink format, it's only digital. But this is also the advantage of exploring more or organic, let's say analog versus digital, and finding the integration, or at least the attributes that you want to bring in from one or the other, or the integration, is an interesting exploration for sure. So painting for me is more about letting go, and it connects to writing as well.
Okay, but let's in that line explore
pottery.
Pottery. Yeah, pottery happened last year. Pottery just kind of, it ended up being, at this point, sort of 9 months, I guess I was exploring it, almost a year. It just happened chance in a situation, meaning a friend of a friend offered, hey, maybe you want to learn pottery and teach it, because we want to teach it in English in Spain. I said, great. So I had no idea what it was going to be about. And at the time, it was like a personal moment in my life where I was going through some my own internal work. So funny enough, pottery initially, much to my resistance, I guess, initially, became a real introspective, emotional tool for processing a lot of things I was going through at the time. And you can see how I breathe here at this moment. So you imagine you're in your pottery wheel, and you're bending forward, you're looking down for many hours. This closing is looking inside. So the body posture says introspective, looking down. You know this from NLP, no? When you go to the emotional line looking down, you're either remembering how you felt, how do I feel now, or how will I feel in this situation? Depending on the timeline. Normally it's the person's left is the past and right is forward. And you have to reverse it if you're trying to assess someone, whether they're reflecting or projecting or otherwise. So it was very interesting. Ceramics was like this, but very from the first time, even my teacher said, Mirce, she said that from the beginning I already had my style. And it's true, I went into it thinking, I'm not a beginner. All my life I've been playing with creativity and clay and working professionally as a fashion photographer, as a graphic designer, working on web and new media and everything. So I take all that confidence and I go, okay, this is a different medium, But I know my style, and immediately I could see that, and I know this from my painting, I create textures. For me, texture, something that looks older, like it has history. I like more earthy colors in that context, but I like blue. I like oaky colors. So I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that if it went sort of a Japanese sort of style of flavor, I knew that would be something that I resonate with. And that's exactly what happened. I created pieces that were all individual. I was not interested in creating 10 of the same thing. I would create one-offs. And a lot of times it was bowls. I think there's a lot of psychology in that. And I made them heavy. So there's this bowl, which you can put a lot of things, very multifunctional, but very heavy, very ceremonial, it had a weight physically that gave it a weight, personality, stability, texture, and with the Japanese Asian kind of feel. So I explore things like chattering. When the wheel is spinning, you have a piece of metal and you can make them, and it's a very loose piece of metal. And you imagine if it's spinning and this touches, it's going to skip across. And as the metal is skipping and the clay is, we say leather, it's in between. When you throw it, it's wet, and when it's dry, it's solid and fragile. You trim it when it's leather. So that's skipping across, and it's taking little pieces out. It's beautiful. And then it creates such a unique texture, and it gives you the surprise of what it's going to be like. You know, you have an element of control, and the other side of it, you let go of control. And again, we're back to what is the difference between digital and analog, or more traditional creative arts. And pottery is just like that. It's like you can control everything. And the interesting thing to add is that your emotional state affects completely this clay. And my teacher would say, and she was in a way, she's like a untrained master of psychology, because she could understand the people really well. After 20 years of teaching, she can tell your emotional state. She's seen every different scenario, people's moments of happiness and the opposite, sadness and depression and anxiety and frustration. So she saw all of that. So she said, well, the clay is natural. When you're touching the clay, it's the earth. You're influencing that. It's influencing you. So you realize quickly you have a relationship you're building with this piece of clay. And sometimes, honestly, I'd go in and I couldn't center the clay. And centering the clay is the first thing you learn. And you can learn it within 20 minutes. This is how you center. But you can go in after doing 100 hours with a different emotional state, and you try to exert your will. And guess what? You can't even center it. And at that moment, that meant tears. That meant me feeling anger, frustration, sadness. And then I literally had to leave to be in my own space, to let go of my emotions.
So
like
very curious.
An emotional wheel.
An emotional wheel. Well said. I'm going to coach you on that. Wheel.
Okay. Whoops. 1 second. There we go.
Acting.
Yes.
Yeah, acting's a curious one. It came out of meditation, if you believe it or not. And part of the meditation that was prescribed to me by my teacher said, do mantras 40 days, 30 minutes, and then sit in silence after. And I did that for 40 days. And you're practicing like whatever. And you can put a soundtrack in the background, whatever. Everyone has their own method. The point is you're creating vibrations, sound, moving it through your body, feeling the effects. Physically, you feel like, I can see you breathe there, so you're feeling like it could be good. Yeah, I saw you breathe. We can do a meditation at the end. So then you go to the state where you feel like, okay, physically you're shaking, let's say, weight or tension off your body. You're feeling it go deeper. You're feeling you're breathing deeper. And what happens is that you also feel that your posture is changing. And after a while, it opened me up. Again, we're back to this is sadness, and this is happiness, and this is projection, extension, happiness, confidence. So when I go to those states, it built me up, it released things, but also allowed me to project. And through those moments, I felt like, yeah, I feel like I'm more than this. I'm more than a photographer. I'm more than a martial artist. I'm more than Canadian man. All these little labels we put. I was like, and I felt, I want to be in front of the camera. I want to be on a stage. I want to follow the curiosity that equally gives me, if not more, fear. And I was like, right. And I told a friend of mine who's an actress here in Madrid, and she's done some stuff for Netflix, and she said to me, hey, contact an agency. And I was like, okay. And she said, well, you know, they're looking for people with different looks. You look different in Spain, and, you know, it's commercial jobs, you know, it could pay well, and it could be fun. So I immediately after that called an agency, said, my life has changed. I want to expand my experience, and I'm a photographer, but I want to be in front of the camera. And long story short, within a couple of weeks, went in, they called me in, joined the agency immediately, because I thought, fantastic. So signed the contract and said, let's do it. So subsequently, within a few months, I had over a dozen castings, which supposedly is quite good. I don't know, because I guess I'm a little bit different from a lot of the people here. And because I have I think I have advantages, because not only I look different, I have a different cultural background. So I'm much more expressive. And the great thing about acting is what's happened is that I always used to think acting was like to be someone else. But because you're doing it commercially, meaning that you're doing it for a brand, they want you. If they choose you, they choose you because you are the way you are. So what's been interesting about acting is that it's been a way to look at the other side of the camera, which is obvious. Now, as a photographer, if I'm directing people or with video or stills, I switch roles. So I understand the lighting, I understand the positioning, I understand the camera, so I shouldn't be moving too far out of the camera. So I understand a lot of things very naturally, so it gives me a big advantage. And then I know that the people I work with in the past, if they're very friendly and polite, but they keep their talk to a minimal, this is good. So you're very polite, you listen, you do your best. If you don't know, you ask a question. So I know how to be the best performer. And then I have meditation, and then I have martial arts. Then I have health practices that put me in the best state. I know how to maintain, to look healthy, to maintain my youth, my energy. I have all the formula to be the best performer I can be. So what's happened now is that it makes me realize that all the things I do is about performing well. All the fascination with fasting, cold showers, meditation, different cleansing processes made me realize that this is the bridge between being a performer and capturing or being in front of the camera. So that's the fusion of all that I do. And even now to this day when I'm painting, I'm looking how to capture and create an image, but it's an integration of how I feel that expresses or performs an image of what I believe that particular art, say in the Silat point of view, in the martial arts, that's what I'm trying to do. So, long answer.
Yes. Well, we're gonna head towards the end almost. 2 more questions to go. Just a quick one.
Chocolate.
That's a fun bullet.
Well, funny enough, I have a great relationship with chocolate, but I've taken a break from chocolate. Chocolate and I have taken a break in our relationship the last 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know why, and I'll tell you, this is part of one of the practices I do. When I feel like chocolate or sugar or coffee is a good example, when I start to, the taste changes and I feel it's less favorable, I enjoy it less, and this happens with coffee, I think it's quite common. One day just be like, I don't like the taste, and I cut it. I cut it for 1 month or more, and I've done it for coffee, and I've done it with chocolate, or sugar, bread, and I think it's a combination of different things. One, it's a check-in to kind of say, hey, listen, I'm the boss. I choose what I eat. And this is part of the fasting. Fasting gives you incredible benefits on many levels. That's another conversation about health. So with chocolate was the same. I felt like I was using chocolate as a distraction or to give me pleasure, and therefore I had to eliminate it because, and this is an interesting one, because I had a thought this morning which I want to share with you as well. I woke up this morning thinking, and I listened to a lot of positive YouTube videos, and I really feel that there's so many mentors, and we share a lot of them. Chase Jarvis was a catalyst in a lot of our expansion creatively, and also looking at the people that he counts as friends. and they've been a big influence. 30 Days of Genius, for example. So a lot of this stuff I look at in the morning, it kind of picks me up. It makes me realize that, yeah, this is a good thing. This self-improvement. I'd say self-improvement and also continual learning are two things that I really believe in more and more. So my brain jumps around a lot. So
I need some chocolate, I don't want to say.
Yeah, so subsequently, trigger word, yeah, chocolate. So subsequently, what happened this morning, I thought to myself, okay, the education, entertainment, you can call it entertainment or you can call it distraction. Let's say distraction and education, or edutainment would be the middle. And that could be like watching a documentary. I thought, yeah, when I have my leisure time, I should be ideally watching a documentary. Why? Because it's like entertaining, but educational. So I thought, if I'm going to better use my time, I should try to do that higher choice and choose that. In the morning, I know it should be time to create and to be learning. So I started thinking a lot about this idea, and I thought, what would happen if I reduced my dopamine hits that I get from watching a series, eating chocolate, drinking too much alcohol? I don't drink very much, but if I have a glass of wine, that gives a certain amount of pleasure, which means that I don't need to look at that pleasure through my creativity. So what happens if you reduce that? Your sensitivity level goes down, your dopamine level goes down. So it means that when you do something like creating something, draw a picture, write something, you feel that, oh, that dopamine, you feel like, oh, that's so satisfying. So I think that there's an element I'm exploring now where if I could bring down my sensitivity to other stimulus, then the things I do creatively become more stimulating, and therefore I choose those to get my fix. Okay. So this is the thing that hit me today. I thought, interesting. I thought less technology, less distractions, which I believe in anyways, turning off the phone, go in nature, don't take your phone with you, be in nature, which means be offline. Be analog, be organic, pure. So for me, that's the chocolate is an interesting one because it did make me think about this thought I had this morning. So I thought I'd share that with you.
Well, I'm gonna take that on board at the same time, making my dishwashing, more creative. I might experiment because normally when I decide to stop eating chocolate, I move on to bread and butter as a substitute. But let's see if I'm going to start thinking about this. I'm not making promises, but stop chocolate to see how my creativity increases, basically. Because my clown character is called Choco Freaky, and that name comes for a reason. I'm not going to explain anymore. But we're going to move on to the last question, just to finish off.
Future.
I would challenge you on that word, and I would say present. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to give you some words of wisdom. The future...
You adopted the pose of the sensei now, Mr. Miyagi. I'm all ears.
The future doesn't exist. And I know that sounds kind of like hokey pokey spiritual, but it's true. And I've listened to a lot of people talk about a lot of things related to spirituality. Let's use the word mindfulness. Mindful. What is it to be mindful? Is to be aware. What is it to be aware? It's to be in the moment and conscious about as much as you can and be able to let go of whatever's happened previously and whatever you think about in the future. So it's an element of surrender, allowing. We do it. We breathe, and we suddenly. What are we releasing when we breathe? We're releasing a burden. What's the burden? What we haven't done that we put on our list from yesterday. What we anticipate or try to prepare for the future. So the future is an interesting one because I think that actually the more we enter the moment, the more we enter our practice and our, let's say, our rituals or our habits, the more we're able to be prepared for this idea of the future. You know, so I would say that the more one can use the word present and be present in what they do, and this is not always be like concentrating, I'm fixed on this thing. No, it's the opposite. It's like you're doing that, but you're creating a moment. It's like a bubble. And see that we have the circle. You know, you have the circle and people are training in the circle. But the circle's empty. You fill it with the energy. You create that moment. I do it with the environment in a photo shoot. I do that with my own space when I enter in front of the camera. I put myself into a state to project an energy so they see not only the aesthetics of me, but they feel my energy. And that's performance as well. So we're there and we're projecting, but it's done not because of what they need, it's because you're projecting inside and to out. So I think that being present allows you that power. And I realized that I remember writing about a year ago, I remember specifically when I went through a really challenging time, I realized the truth about something I had heard and I had framed it in a slightly different way. And the truth was this, that's something to think about. The best gift you can give to someone is to be 100% present. Think about that. Try it.
Yes.
It could be 5 minutes. 5 minutes with someone and you're 100%. If you practice this in reality, consciously, you will see it because you'll see the people who aren't present. You'll realize the people in your life that make you feel incredible because they are present with you. This is what I try to do more and more in my life and with myself or with a cat or with a tree or with an environment. I try to be present there. So that's what I challenge you on with the future is we don't need to think about the future if we are constantly in the moment and progressing through self-improvement and we're learning and being as consciously aware of what we're learning and absorbing and also let it go, like we said, forgetting. If you're able to do that, I think that whatever will come in the next stage, if you want to call that future, you will be a better person for that and better able to adapt and give more of the right thing that you need to give, and you'll have less expectations and anxiety because you're again in that moment. The next moment you're in deeper and you're a better version.
Yes, I'm thinking of, I don't know, surfing comes to mind. Surfing or swimming is like develop the skill of swimming. If you're in a storm, your best chance of survival is trust that you can swim and hope for the best. But worrying about it is not going to help you. But having the skill, yes, you have the skill, trust that you have it. If it happens, do the best you can given the situation, but you cannot train for that situation because maybe the storm in the sea doesn't happen. It's a hurricane and you need another skill. But the essence of the skill is trust that you will do the best. And in order to trust, you need to be relaxed and be present, almost.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I'm opening up to close. I'm starting to explore the concept of flow and the creativity. But creativity or any creative task, discipline, whatever project, as a flow development. So if you want to develop the skill of flowing, do anything creative so that it feels sketchnoting, for example, it could be one thing, pottery, martial arts, anything, dancing, whatever, meditation, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, it has to be you have to like it, but it's preparing you for whatever is to come. And we don't know, they talk in business and the companies about the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, whatever, all sort of the future, which is already here. Things like this current crisis. These things, if it's not one, it's going to be another one. It's going to come soon or later. So the only way to prepare for that is not to worry about it. Just develop yourself because you're going to be the cork that floats on the water.
100%.
Yeah, it makes me think about this idea, this analogy I heard recently. Is that you imagine when you're in a pool and you have you can visualize this, a child's trying to swim and you're trying to teach them to swim, a baby. So you don't want to, you want them to have a certain amount of distance, so they have to swim towards you. And what you do is actually you pull away, and this creates space. But also it creates a vacuum that pulls a child into you. So if you think about that analogy for creativity, you create space. We got a circle again, which could be time, could be a physical space. It's, you know, it could be it's a mental space, a mindset, an attitude. To allow, to invite in what you want, or what, not even what you want. You don't know what you want. You just give the space in a certain time with some set of tools, let's say, and you see what happens. And this goes back to the original idea of the muse. What is the muse? The muse is not, or the genius. You're not the genius. This changed. This is something quite recognized historically now, is that they say that this person's a genius. No, you have a genius. So if you create a space, and I do this with photography, lighting, structure, idea, I sketch an idea, I set everything up, and then the person walks in, I have to let go. I created a space with my criteria, my tools, and then the magic, let's say, comes in because you allow into that space to enter inspiration, a moment, improvisation, the muse comes in, the genius comes in, and then that's the magic. So that creating that space is like that. You create space, it creates a vacuum that pulls in whatever comes into that. So there's a lot of, it sounds a bit mystical, but I think it's actually really practical. I think it's actually something that does happen. And if you allow yourself that, to trust your skill, to do your preparation, your organization before, and then let go, allow, then what will come will surprise you.
Yeah, it's like life is actually a big improv act.
Yeah.
So the good thing about doing improv, I haven't done much, but I appreciate it as a skill, is that, again, you train, you practice, you prepare, but then whatever comes, it's like, well, all the martial arts training, people always thought I would be prepared for any self-defense situations. And what I learned from my particular approach is, first, I did like more than 20 years of karate, but I didn't train specifically for self-defense. So regarding self-defense techniques, I didn't have the repertoire. And regarding the attitude for self-defense, I didn't have it either, because I haven't grown up in a place where I need to develop that skill. But I came to realize it was an attitude. Any person who grows up in a place where they have to deal with environment in a hard way, with zero karate, were better prepared for self-defense because they had the mindset and they trust their instinct. And it's natural. You throw an elbow, head, step, kick, whatever. It doesn't need to be fancy. And with all my repertoire and my history of competition and everything, I was useless because somebody comes at me, I freeze. So it's like technical background and setting up the environment is fine, but the key word here is the mindset. And go with what you get and trust whatever, because what I did have from all these years of training was reflexes, and I could cover. And if I have to punch, I'm not going to break my hand. If my instinct leads me to punch, I'm going to be in a better position than anybody who hasn't trained to not harm myself much during the process of doing whatever, because some techniques will come up, but if my mindset isn't there, I have nothing. Now the training kicks in on its own. The practice years of intuitive, it's like driving. Even if you just spend years not driving, you get into, or on a bike, you get onto the one. Maybe you're a little wobbly at the beginning, but you just keep going in a moment. So it's minutes to adapt. So there is a purpose of the training, but the reality is just be present and develop yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's yeah, there's a level of trusting that what you have acquired is enough, you know. And in Silat we have this idea of, you know, there's only 3 movements: open, closing, and circling in Silat. And if you think about it, you know, it's a bit like life. You know, we close down, but the point is we have to try to open. So by opening up, it's also, again, it's this idea that the analogy of opening is to open a space to invite in.
the storytelling, beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, also, but the idea is to open, to create space for whatever to enter into that. And the more you fixate purely on result, you narrow your vision. And it's not saying you don't have an objective, but you have those clearly defined. But within the creative process, it's important to let it go organically. And I do the same thing with CLAD. So your idea of this being open and trusting and having the right attitude is the same thing. It's exactly the same thing that we're talking about. That your attitude is what's going to allow you to see opportunities without being too fixated on a specific result. Because if you have a specific result in mind, then you potentially won't allow yourself to be open to what's going to happen, what presents itself. And this is also ego, because ego says, no, I should have done this. I should have been able to defend myself in this way. And that's often a common thing. In my limited experience with self-defense in a physical way, very often there's a long time afterwards where you're going over it again and again and wondering, oh, I should have done differently. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Same thing happens with a photo shoot. Same things happen with a project. Once you create it, you think, why didn't I think of this? But the point is to learn from it, winning, losing. No, winning, learning, When you
Yes.
don't win,
Yes.
when you don't achieve exactly what you think you set out to do, you have a great opportunity to really assess how to improve it. What did work and what would you change next time? It's not like wrong, it's just that what do you feel or what do you understand are the criteria or the possibilities of how you could improve the result next time. And if we take this mindset, this attitude, again, it's the same. And I think the training is the same. For me, all those things are the same. Create a space, have an objective. We have 1 hour class. I want to follow this idea of scarf, using it as a whip. That's what I do for CLAD. Class, 1 hour. These students, this skill level, with this objective, with this principle. Done. Where it goes, we don't know. But I want to see where it goes. I am the guide to see where it goes. With whatever we do creatively, I think to have some criteria and then the movement within is where we where we allow the genius to come in, as I said before.
Well, before we finish, I'm gonna have the conclusions I gathered from this, because let's say I have got some insights right from the last points we've been speaking, but I would like to also finish with a final thought about creativity. My reflection is I have named my brand Creative Sensei because it's all about mastering creativity, not because I am a master of creativity, but because I think everybody can master creativity. But I was thinking more of creativity as the skill of the future that we all need to make the world a better world, even to survive as a species. But the insight I got today is not just as a work skill that, a selling point or something that we need to develop, but it's also the mindset or the philosophy or the practice that will allow you to dive in and survive in the future. And I'm not defining anything specific. Anything that life or the world throws at you, you will be better equipped if you master yourself through the creative practice.
Yeah.
And that's
I
my
agree
final thought.
completely.
So I really thank you for that insight. And if you want to finish off with some, no wonder why the first interview in English is with a martial artist who's a sensei himself and practitioner of many creative disciplines. But I would like to just sum up, give us the actionable step or a tweetable or some finishing thought.
No pressure.
No pressure. You get 3 attempts. Come on.
I would say whatever your creative practice, or let's say your creative curiosity is, create that circle, create that time frame, create that space that you define. Give yourself 1 or 2 basic tools. Even a challenge would be to give yourself 1 tool. Imagine, give yourself 20 minutes to sit down with a blank piece of paper. You've got a blue colored pencil and you've got watercolors, but you can only use yellow, I don't know, for example, and you want to express the theme of this. So you limit, you restrict, you set a very clear structure, and you see from there what comes out. Lock things down and then allow that flow within that. And then at the end, throw it out.
Let's set up a challenge for the audience if there is any. Like, I'll summarize it in writing later. That's a challenge. Put constraints, limit the time and the space and the tools, and off you go and see and explore. Well, thank you, Steve. It's been a great time to share this morning with you. The conversation can go on and on and on and on. We know each other. We could. But it's been great. I think it flew.
Yeah.
How do you say? It flowed.
Flowed or it flew by, we say.
Nicely, I think. And we touched on very interesting points, and we might come back for more at some point. Thank you so much. Have a good time.
Thank you, Vego. See you soon. Bye-bye.